Hi, art teacher here with you again, and welcome back to the printmaking series. And this is a continuation of the printmaking series. Be sure to do your subscriptions, your likes, your favorites, which is nice to have those. Whatever you do, and then leave a comment below if I'm unclear about anything, and I'll try to address those issues. Now, today we're continuing with lino cuts, and we're going to talk about cutting the block. Before we do cutting the block, you know, the actual cutting with these tools here, I'll just put those together. Before we do that, we're going to have our drawing done. So, number one, you have to be sure, get a half sheet of this paper, cut it in half, get a half sheet of it, take it like this, put it on the block. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered at this stage, right? Then just crease down all four sides really nicely. Be sure to crease it down good. So that's what I'm doing here. So I have all four sides creased down pretty good, and I make my drawing right here. You see how these sides are pointed this way? That's the side where I make my drawing. So whatever that drawing might be, and in this case I'll just do a triangle, a circle, and a square, and with a border around them, and then I'll shade in those three shapes. I would never do this as a print because the amount of work it takes to do a print really makes you think about what the image is and how, you know, you have to have a well thought out, detailed, interesting image, because you don't want to put that kind of work into your print so with just something like this. So that's only for example. So you do your drawing here and color in the parts that you want dark. Color those parts in. Don't leave don't just do the lines, but do the shading in on the parts you want to be dark, as I did in this not so good image. Of course, here's the drawing I'm actually going to be using on my graphite transfer. It's a more carefully drawn out image, and that should work better. So, the idea is have your drawing ready. In this case, I'll do this better one. Have your drawing already done on a half sheet of this kind of paper. Fold that drawing down over the edges, or better still, it's good to fold it down ahead of time so you have the dimensions ready. So you're going to fold the paper down here on the edges so that it will fit perfectly on the block, and it's a perfect 4x6. Then, in this case, I'm going to take this drawing and put it on my block. So it should be all ready to go. Then I'm going to take my tape and tape it into place. You know, you don't have to be super careful with the drawing. I like to be a little careful with it because a lot of times these drawings take some time. If you watch my video on how to design a print, you'll notice I'm recommending you take an hour or two, or some time at least, on each of these drawings. Anyway, what I've done is taped it on there, and by doing this graphite transfer technique, you're able to avoid all the problems that result from the image reversal effect you get on a print. So whatever you have on the drawing, the exact thing on the drawing, it'll be oriented the same way in the finished print. So that's what I've done here. Now I take my pencil, and I've already done this one time, but I'll do it again. Take my pencil, and I'm pushing pretty hard. And I'm pushing hard over the entire print. So the entire drawing is going to be transferred onto the block through this graphite transfer method. And this takes a couple minutes. I mean, And again, with this, with these types of prints, one of the main things to keep in mind is try to be very patient, because, you know, if you mess up and you're most of the way done with your cutting and you mess up, you might have to just trash that whole print. And that's happened to me. You might just have to trash that block and start again from the beginning. And that's no fun. Oh, I got another pencil ready. I always recommend having a couple pencils ready, more than one. Anyway, once you start cutting on these prints and doing the cutting, I'm really asking you to be careful, deliberate, slow, you know, don't rush it, all those things, because one little mistake can really mess up your design. So that transfer should be pretty good by now. So I'll turn it over. Get your hands a little dirty with this, maybe. That's fine. That's the thing about art. You can get a little dirty, a little messy, and that's all right. That just means that you're getting into it, and you're, you know, you're not being. Oh, look at that. That worked out real well. So you can see. You saw how I did it. All I did is draw it a lot, and it transferred that image right onto the block. Now it's going to be oriented the opposite of the, see, it's oriented the opposite of the drawing. I hope you can see that clearly. It's oriented the opposite way, but your finished print will look exactly like your drawing. Okay, so that solves the reverse image problem, the technique I gave you called graphite transfer. That's worth doing, you know, that's worth doing, because what I just told you ends up saving you a lot of trouble if you're into these prints. You know, I had trouble with the first several prints I made because I didn't use that graphite transfer method. I drew it right onto the block. That's not the way to go, I don't think, because you need to think out your image, your drawing, real well. So quick review on that. Number one, get a paper. Number two, cut that thing in half. In this case, I'm just going to tear it with my usual tearing method. If the paper ends up not being perfect, that's fine. This isn't the finished artwork. The print is the finished artwork. Now I have my paper. I'm going to put the paper down on my block, and I'm going to crease it really good on all four sides. Now all four sides are creased. Then on the inside part here, see how this folds inward? On the inside part, I make my drawing and darken in the parts that I'm going to want to leave black in my print. Once I do that, I take it, once I have my drawing done, right? And the drawing has to stay within the bounds of these lines, right? Once that's done, take it and put it on the block again with the drawing on it, tape it down. Okay, I use this type of tape, masking tape. You can use Scotch tape. Tape it down good though. Then rub it like I showed you, pushing hard on the whole thing. Then remove it, and you're going to have a nice surprise, because that drawing is going to appear as a reverse image here, and that solves a lot of problems. Next thing I want to talk about, cutting the block. Cutting the block, that's really, for me, that's the fun part, that's the interesting part, that's what I really like to do, but it's also the time-consuming part. So, designing the print is a lot of fun. Drawing it out on the paper, I really enjoy that, okay, because I'm really thinking it out. After I do that, though, and it's on the image is on the block using that graphite transfer method, then I have to cut away all the white parts. So I use two cutters. I have this speedball cutter here, which is a blade. I think that's called number 6 in the speedball catalog. Then I have this one, which is their smallest gouge. So that's one of the smaller gouges. Those are the two that I use, okay? And I have these two separate cutters. So you can get these cutters at almost any online art supply retailer or any craft store. Get at least one of these with the 6-blade kit, and that'll have this number 6 blade, which is just a blade one. Most people who do these prints do not do it the way I'm going to show you, but I think this way is so much better. Most people just use gouges, and there are different size gouges: small, medium, curved, V-shaped, all these gouges. I don't use a lot of those. I just use the small one. I have a little different technique, but you know what? My technique is really good for getting those crisp edges that I like in my prints. So, now, I'm going to do a little bit of cutting just so you can see what we're going to do. So I'm going to start with this blade, and what I like to do is just go along the dark lines. Let's say I'm doing this star right here. Okay, I'm going to do the inside of that star. That's kind of a thin line. That's a challenging one. If that little piece of linoleum breaks off there, that kind of ruins a lot of the print. So I need to be very careful with this. So I take my blade and I simply push in to get that little triangle part of the star. Okay, then turn it, push in, do the same thing again, and I can get more, I guess I would get a finer level of detail using the blade as opposed to using the traditional method of just pulling it away with the gouge. Okay, so my method is not really what you're going to find as you look at any other videos on lino cut. You're probably not going to see anyone else using this blade. You probably won't see anyone using that on the other videos on YouTube or other places that show you how to do this. Now, I've made my cuts. There are 10 cuts there because there are 5 arms to the star. Now I simply take my blade. In this case, I can take the blade and start getting rid of that little bit of linoleum. So I might have to redo the cut, pull it up a little. When I'm removing, so I was able to remove a little bit there. As I remove larger areas of linoleum, I'm going to use a gouge. But on this fine detail, see, I jumped right into fine detail here, didn't I? As I remove this fine detail stuff, I'm just taking it out with the blade. So as I turn it around, I'm removing a lot of fine detail. And this area that I'm removing is going to show up as white on my finished print. Okay, so one last little refinement, of course. I would never hold it up like this if I weren't demonstrating. I would leave it flat, and you know, I have great care in regards to safety. I have great care. So I'm careful with these sharp blades. Now, I have cut out that star. If I tried to use a gouge, even one of these gouges that is in the shape of a letter V like this, even one of those, I could not do that. The only way I can do that fine detail is with one of these types of blades. I recommend you try to do fine detail in your prints because, you know, the amount of work you're putting into it, why not do something detailed and interesting? Now, what I like to do after I do a little piece of detail like that and cut it out, I get a scrap paper and a pencil and I proof it. Which means I just go over it like this with my pencil and see roughly how it's going to look. Okay, so I can see, yes, it does come out as a star. You can see right there, it comes out as a star, and so that's going to work. I can leave that alone for now, but I can adjust it later if I want to. Now, that's a good example of how you can use this flat blade, number 6 from Speedball. That flat blade is good for detailed area. And do it the way I showed you. Just go along the outside of that dark line with this blade, and then just slowly pick it up with the tip of that blade once you've done it. If I'm going to do a larger area, I outline everything with this blade right along the lines on the graphite transfer area, and I pick it out using one of the gouges. I use the smallest gouge in that 6-blade set. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do a larger area here inside, let's say, there aren't a lot of larger areas because it's a detailed print, but inside one of these larger stars here, let's say that one, I have larger stars at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the inside of that star. So, as I showed you before, I'm just outlining the outside of that dark black line. And I got to be sure later on, when I do the other side of that line, that this line has a pretty good amount of thickness. If I make my lines thin, as I mentioned in another video, if you make your lines thin, they're just going to break off. The linoleum's just going to break. And if that happens, it kind of trashes the whole block. If you want to do thin lines, you're going to go for a type of printmaking called etching. That's a lot different than this type of stuff. This type of stuff's good. These lino cuts are good for shapy stuff. Etching's good for line work. Anyway, I'm going along all those lines on the insides. And I'm being reasonably careful. Again, I've done, I would say over 100. I've done a lot of these, a lot. And therefore, I have a reasonably good skill level, so I'm able to hold it up like this when I do it. When you do yours, don't hold it up like that. You're going to want it, leave it flat on the table, and be careful with it. Some people even have special metal racks they use. I don't go for that. That's my opinion. Do what you want, experiment with what you want, but I don't like those. I leave it flat here and carefully look at what I'm doing. Boom, boom, boom. And it's a thing that you do for, you can sit there and do it for hours, right? If you have a lot of detail, you sit there and do it for hours. Like this Greek pattern around the outside as a border, that's hours, that's going to take a long time to cut that. But it's going to look really good, and more importantly, while I'm doing it here, and I'm concentrating on it, I get lost in it, maybe have music on, and I enjoy doing it. That's why I do them, right? That's why we do art. Anyway, so I've cut the inside area, the area I want white, out of this star shape. Now, I switch to this gouge. The smallest gouge in that kit. And again, usually I would leave it flat to do this, but I'm going to, toward the middle of that large shape, I'm just going to dig in that gouge and those lines, and I'm going to do it carefully and watch closely and make sure that the only linoleum that's coming up is following right along that line. You see, that's perfect right there. When I lifted that up, I got a perfectly straight line there. That would be impossible to achieve using only this without the flat blade. So I can just remove that big chunk of linoleum, and that was a successful removal of the linoleum. Now I want to get this other arm. I go slow with it, make sure that the lines are cut deep enough. Good, that was perfect. Still have a little tiny chunk up in the corner. Got that out. Next arm of the star. Maybe dig in again. You really got to get a feel for this. Dig this tool underneath the linoleum. Go slow, go deliberate, pull it up. Perfect. It's going, so far this has been perfect. It's going along, and you find these lines are the exact lines I had carved out. I've been able to remove the linoleum exactly according to those lines that I carved out with the flat one. Okay? So, remove that. Oh, it came out, the whole chunk came out in one thing. So what I've done here is removed all the inside of that star, made these lines perfectly straight, and then they come to a perfect point at each point. If I used only this gouge and pulled it out as I went, it'd be almost pretty much impossible to get the point on those stars. So the method I'm showing you allows you a lot more possibility for straight edges and points and geometric stuff. Which, to be honest, you don't see. That's kind of avoided a lot of times because most people only use the gouges. They don't use that straight edge one like this. Okay, so you would continue cutting the block in the method I just showed you. Again, a quick review on that method. You will take this blade, the number 6, the blade one on the speedball kit, and go around the outside of any lines or any shapes you have. Okay, because you're moving it, you're removing any part which is left white. You're not removing the part which is dark. After you go over those lines on the outside of the line with that sharp blade, then come in with the smallest gouge in that kit. You'll see it. I think that's a number 1. They call that blade number 1. Well, I don't see the number, but you'll see it. It's the smallest one. Then take that. Well, you can remove the linoleum from small shapes with just the blade. When you're removing the linoleum from the larger shapes, like this star, use the gouge and carefully and deliberately pull it out. Go very slow. You don't want to pull out any of the linoleum that's going to make up the black part of the print. Then just go through the entire print using that same method. Takes a while, especially if you have a highly detailed print. Totally worth it though. And once you get into it, gosh, you're going to enjoy it. I'm telling you, it's one of my favorite art activities. You're going to want to make these drawings detailed, that level of detail or more. You're going to want to go slow and carefully. Don't rush these. The idea is to enjoy the process, not to try to get done quick, okay? Getting done quick means you're just going to end up with a mess. You got to go slow, careful, develop the skill over time. And you have to keep safety in mind. Of course, these are very sharp. But if you're doing fine detailed areas, you're probably not going to have to cut yourself too much unless you're being completely careless. Okay, because it's fine detailed areas and you're paying close attention. I've done many hundreds of hours with these types of tools and I've never cut myself with them. So, but do be aware of it and go careful with it. Okay, then just complete the entire block. It's going to take hours pulling out all the linoleum from the white parts. And it ends up like, and I'll show you a few of my examples, more or less should look something like this. I have already inked that and used that as a print. That's why it's black. Here's another one I did. And notice there are a lot of straight edges and corners on these. Okay? That's what I'm talking about with this flat tool. It allows you to do those. Here on this one, I've even done words and letters. Don't do words and letters until after you've done at least 20 prints. Those are hard, but this graphite transfer method makes it possible for you to do words and letters. Do a lot of prints before you do the words and letters, because carving out the fine detail of those requires a level of skill that wouldn't be, you know, good. That wouldn't be available to you until you've done a lot of them. Here's another one. And that's going to give you a couple of examples of kind of how they should look when you're done. Remember, it's nice to include a border. Try to make them built mostly out of shapes and go very detailed on them. I really hope that a lot of you take me up on the challenge to do these prints, because for me it's one of the most fun art activities, you know, and you just need to buy a few little tools for it. You know, it's going to be a few dollars, Okay, you know, you got to pay the money, but gosh, it's fun, and you'll, if you start when you're young, your level of skill could be phenomenal by the time you're in your 20s. Take a look. I would say go to Google Images and Google the word lino cut. You'll see a great many people are making these prints and doing beautiful things with them. Even that site called Etsy, where they sell handcrafted items. A lot of people are selling their prints on there, and you can purchase the prints for not that much money, and you'll see great examples of really good prints. Okay, next time I want to get into, even though this was pretty in-depth and a long video, the next one will also be, I want to talk about how to print from the block, how to take the block, put the ink on it, put the paper on it, press it down, and pull it up and end up with a print. Now, just saying it sounds easy, right? Just me listening to me just say that just then, oh, that sounds easy. It's a little bit trickier than it sounds, so it's going to probably be another one of these marathon long videos. Hey, I mean, I was really thinking this video out, and thinking how I would tell you about it. And what I'm doing here is a lot different than how a lot of people do it, because I rely on that flat blade. But try using my method, it's good. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you get into making these prints. It could be a lifelong activity that you're just going to love to do for the rest of your life. You take care now.